This program is brought to you by the City of Fountains Coaches Association.
Carlos Nelson with Cascade Sports, and today we have the head men's coach. Are you the women's coach also?
Yes, I am. Men's and women's.
Head men's and women's coach, Mr. Craig McVey from Spring Hill College. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. Doing well.
All right.
Given the fact that we're social distancing and we're doing everything we're doing, so as well as anybody can be doing.
We really social distancing, you and myself.
We are.
Let's get right into it. Off camera, I was asking you because now I'm really home because I'm dealing with a sport that I participated in, track and field, and
Okay.
you were a track athlete in our yesteryear days. Run it down on when you first fell in love with track and field, and let's go back a ways to how you got to where you're at right now.
Okay.
And mention the coaches and the people that helped you along the way. Give them their props.
Okay. Long time ago, many years ago, decades ago, got involved with age group at the ripe old age of 8 years old. And it was only AAU then. There was no USATF, which TAC was before USATF. But, summer meets, there weren't really any spring programs at the time, but it was a summer rec program that grew into a track club. Grew up in Manhattan, Kansas, where Kansas State is located. So they had a top 10 men's program. They didn't have a women's program at the time, but a top men's program nationally every year. DeLoss Dodds was the head coach, and he ended up becoming the AD at Texas after leaving Kansas State and going with the Big 8 conference at the time, back to K-State as their AD, and then he ended up being the AD at Texas for a number of years. And the program was, the youth program was in the summer in Manhattan, was the recreational office in Manhattan, and meets out of town, a home meet almost every weekend. So became a track junkie at a real early age, and did that for all the way up through high school.
What did you run, by the way?
Early on, you name it. If there was an event, that's what I did. And did some long jump, did some triple jump. Longest thing they had at the time for my age, way back in the dark ages, was the
well, that's both of us. Don't put me back there with you.
I won't go there. I won't take any prisoners with that. So
they're running 880 runs and 440 runs, no meters.
The longest thing they had for my age group was and so I guess it was the 660, but it was a lap and a half, and the longer it was, the better I was. So I gravitated to middle distance and whatnot. And a guy that had been on the staff at Kansas State as a grad assistant, his name was Lon Floyd, and he worked with the summer program, and as did a guy that ended up being my high school coach, a guy named Bill Congleton, was the head coach, the cross-country coach eventually at Manhattan High School. So Lon I worked with in the summer. I believe it was a couple summers in a row. And then going into the high school program, Coach Bill Congleton was the guy that was our cross-country coach, and Stan Crawford, he was on our track and field staff.
How good were you in cross-country?
Way better than track and field. And
right.
Eventually track and field took over, and all the distance work paid off. So, I could hold my own on the track, and but probably I necessarily. If it was track season, it was all about track and field. If it was cross country, it was all about cross country. I was a kind of sort of okay triple jumper, not quite as good long jumper, but if my legs were longer, I'm only 5'10", but if I was a little bit taller, I would have stayed with the 110 hurdles until they kicked me out of the event, because I dearly loved to hurdle, and in college gravitated to the steeplechase, which became a first love. And so maybe that's kind of where I put everything together, was in the steeplechase. So
tell me this, because we come up about the same time. Out on this end, I'm from New York, and out on this end of the woods, didn't know that you were what I would say homeboy from
right.
Kansas. The man was Jim Ryan back then. Yeah. Yep. And he was up there in Kansas, and he was setting world records. That was he anybody that you looked up to?
I mean, absolutely. Everybody did. I mean, there was Jim was from Wichita East High School. I believe Jim was 4 or 5 years ahead of me. But there was a guy that was at Kansas State that was an all-everything guy that dueled with Jim back and forth. His name was Bob Barati from Wichita North High School. And so both of them role models. Jim's not old enough to really be a role model necessarily, because he was, like I said, probably 4 or 5 years. But I remember the Kansas relays, and having our 4x8 at Manhattan High, be good enough to be invited into the invitational 4x8. We did well, but I remember, I believe it was 2 years in a row. Can't remember whether it was Jim's last race as a collegian or last KU relays as a collegian, or when he was in grad school. But I remember at the time he was still wearing their pink and blue, and was out on the track, and the Glenn Cunningham Mile was right before the high school boys invitational 4x8 relay. And, to have 35,000 people in the stands, crazy like you were at a football game. And, he runs a sub-4 mile, the crowd's going crazy, and you step on the track, and you think, first thing you think is, what have I gotten myself into? But it was a great environment. Of course, who knows how, we did well. I think we ended up second or third in the race. But, it was a select multi-state.
Hey, Coach, coming from the East Coast, the big meets was Penn relays for us. Yep. But you always heard about the Kansas relays.
Absolutely.
And you described something that I don't, it seemed like track and field has fallen off, how many people were in the stands back then.
Yep.
Is that your assessment also as relates?
Absolutely. I think there are a lot of great meets out there, but I remember years ago, Track and Field News, can't remember the year or the issue, but they did an expose on what if somebody, what if you held this big grand track and field meet and nobody came. And I think that was very poignant, and people started looking at the fact of how you stage track and field, what you do with the events to keep it exciting, how you keep it moving, give everybody their opportunity to shine in the limelight. But we all know track and field meets can go on forever. You could go 2 days in a row and still have a third of the meet ready to go and whatnot. So, but I think, back then there was the relay circuit, which I think is underrated now. It exists, but it doesn't. It was Texas, Kansas, Drake.
Oh boy.
Cool. There was a war every weekend. And like you took the same meet and you moved it to a new location, but people ran different events. Maybe you went head to head for three relays in a row to see if you could work the Grand Slam. But it was a 3-week.
See, you had those meets out. We would hear about the Drake relays, the Kansas relays. You were able to participate in them. We basically had the Penn relays was the pinnacle on the East Coast. And you would hear about the Drake in Texas, the Rice. Well, Rice came up to Penn relays one time and almost won the mile relay, but Villanova had Vinnie Matthews and he ran like the first 43 in the 400 meters. that was done. But when you talk about that pink and blue, there was a sprinter from the East Coast. His name was Julio Meade, and he came out to Kansas and was Jim Ryan's teammate. And boy, as high school, you looked at them colors and you looked at him in them colors, and it was like heaven. I was like, man, they really got it. I don't get that feeling no more with track and field. I guess I'm older, but I don't see the same. I just don't see the whole atmosphere the same, and it might be because I'm older.
I think it has to do with not necessarily the way things promoted. I think it has to do with budgets for a lot of schools. And even though things were in challenging times back then, programs have stayed more regional for whatever reason. And if they do travel, fewer people. But I think the thing that I've noticed along the way is if you went to a meet, like, now, don't misunderstand. I went to Kansas State. That's all and white, not pink and blue. So I was.
Right, I understand that.
I know. I'm kidding. But the way the meets were staged, I mean, there was no time to catch your breath. People talk, hey, package it like a 3-ring. You got the jumps going over here, the throws over here, whatever's going on the track, and that's all well and good. But from better to best to something that was even better on the track, event to event to event, by the way that it was staged. And there was a lot of creativity, to have certain races of a given length in the morning, but still at prime time, but not all of them back to back. So you didn't have 3 5,000 meter races in a row. You didn't have 2 10,000s back to back. It was all mixed up, and it was like rolling the dice. You didn't know what you were going to see next, but what you did know is it was going to be good.
You know what?
And
I think
it's a big difference right now.
I talk to a lot of African American athletes that when I get a chance to mingle with some of the younger athletes in track and field, and I try to tell them, you had a handful of blacks that ran distance back then. Mm-hmm. You really, blacks did not run distance until really Kipchoge Kano came over and started that whole revolution. Because in New York,
and about a little bit ahead of me, during Jim Ryan's time, I remember the Boyd brothers from Kenya running at Eastern New Mexico, wearing their green over green, and there were a lot of great wars that went on with some of those guys, and I think Kip Keino started that, and then you saw some guys go to Washington State, some guys go to UTEP, some guys go, you name it, they went everywhere.
It exploded with those distance runners from overseas, really.
Yep.
And how important do you think the changes that have, because when you said you triple jumped and you did all, I never seen a distance man that did that type stuff. If you ran, most of the time it was a sprinter or even a hurdler that would do that. Yep. You was an anomaly as far as I'm concerned.
I was, and my leg speed was okay until the distance miles finally caught up with me. I played a tiny bit of basketball real early in high school, but I knew for what I wanted to do with track and field, that was going to be short-lived. And a couple injury-related things with basketball, and I thought, hey, if I ever want to do anything that, steeplechase was literally maybe a glimmer on the horizon, but I hadn't really thought about it. But I had a minor knee injury in high school, and wasn't so minor, didn't have to have surgery, but it kind of put me out of commission for a while. And so it made me think about priorities and what you had to do. But over the time of training and more training, we had a really good high school program. So we were doing, even in high school, 110 miles a week. That's a lot. You can do the math on that and figure out how many miles.
Hold on. I know. I came from a national team. We back then we had 8 quarter milers that could run 50 point and under. Jerry was running in my class 47.7. And our coach, that's why I asked you about cross country. Our coach, he made, if you ran the 60, you was going to run cross country.
Oh, yeah.
Because he felt that built your leg, you'd have less injuries and everything else. And we had a 149 half miler that was in my class. And back then in the 60s, for high school, that was phenomenal. And when you talk about distance, we had Walter Walls, him and Martin McGrady, he went out to the Golden West back then, and they ran 9:09 for the 2 mile and at a dead heat. And that was flying back then.
Oh, yeah.
So I had a really good coach that when you started way before me. I started when I was basically a sophomore in high school. I ran 60 seconds in a quarter.
Okay.
But by the time I graduated, I had ran 48.9. And it was all about, you were talking about those miles. We would train with Walter every now and then on the weekend. A lot of track guys back then were really dedicated.
Oh, yeah.
You practice in the morning, practice with the team, practice at night, trying to get good. And you distance guys, y'all took it up to a whole nother level, running all of those miles. How many miles were you putting in a week?
In high school, about 110. And that was mostly our program. That was some on my own because of knowing where I wanted to go with it, and stuff that you did on a run on your own, stuff that you did on weekends that maybe other people didn't, and stuff like that. But
how do you feel now, the athletes? Do you dealing with high school and you dealing with these college athletes? How do you feel their commitment to distance and what have you?
I think a lot of high school coaches know that if people are going to make the transition from high school to college, that they've got to be well trained. And I think for the most part, everybody's. I think people are kind of keeping an eye on the numbers of miles that their high school athletes are putting in, because it can lead to
injury.
You get a number of kids that outrun, have a great capacity, but some of them maybe even outrun their family budget and their capacity for being able to stay in shoes. And so some kids get hurt in high school just because they can't, afford to buy that next pair of trainers. And
how important is that now?
A lot of people are well
intended. The shoes have really changed since they only basically had Adidas and Puma when we were coming up. There was no Nike. By the time I got to college, Nike had put their first pair of shoes out, really. I think I was a sophomore in college. But how much do you think the shoes have changed the game?
Shoes have changed a lot, especially for competition shoes. I think it's, they're better. I remember some, both, Nike and ASICs and Adidas that.
Right, ASIC, right.
And in high school and all the way through college. And it was just a matter of, what event and what felt most comfortable and what you thought you're going to be at your best in. But I think, especially training shoes, there's a lot of science into it now. There's a lot of really looking the lightest shoe that you can be in. So that's what you want to have on your feet because you're going to go faster. But for a few people, depending upon what they're doing and how they're doing it, sometimes lighter isn't better. And so you want it to be, have your kids, in shoes that are going to, give them stability and be durable enough that it's going to, provide cushioning, but also provide enough of, a firmness that they're not going to bottom out 3 or 4 weeks after they've bought this really nice high-tech pair of shoes. That's really something that you almost want to wear for racing on the roads, but you can't train every day in.
Well, Tell me this also, in
great.
that light, when we were coming up, the Germans were basically, and it was East Germany for the most part, really perfecting the science of track and field, body weight, diet, all the different techniques now. How do you feel that has evolved and changed the sport a little?
Oh, I think it's huge. I think it's huge. I think, that factors a lot into how we train now and how I've trained since I've been coaching in college. Everybody that I've had, regardless of the event group, is one thing that was always talked about forever was, hey, the latest, greatest hard workouts, and, hey, what do you guys do lifting wise, and what do you do that? But a lot of people never ever talk about recovery. And I think, as sports science became a bigger deal, people started to figure out that you can train hard, but you better recover to train hard again. And a lot of people weren't considering that. A lot of injuries happened because of that. A lot of plateaus in performances happen, during a season, just because of the fact that people aren't recovered. And so I think sports science itself has led to people being more educated in how to keep their train well, but how to keep their student athlete recovered so they can perform well.
Speaking of that, and what comes to mind, my high school, we ran in Madison Square Garden 4 times. And the Milrose games and some of they've changed some of those things now, put the corporate label on it. But there was a team called Boys High School back then, and we had the best mile relay, but you were running on those 160 wooden tracks with the bank, and if your team got out in first place and you were equally matched, it was really hard to pass because there was no straightaway, and they would run you high on the bank. And my coach, I had trained so hard, he kept switching the lineup, and I was running against a sprinter. He felt I should have been a 60-yard dash man. I was really a quarter miler, 600 man. He felt I should have been strong enough. And he had told my mother when I didn't win, when I wasn't able to pass the guy, that I was on dope or something ridiculous, but I had just trained too hard. And the point that you making about recovery, you want to win so much, you're doing so much, but you're not really recovered.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as a coach, you've got to be able to notice those things. And I don't think back in the 60s, as you said, it was like train. And when I was running, it was a taboo to lift weights. It was like you shouldn't be lifting weights.
Yep.
And things have changed now.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about your program at Spring Hill.
A lot of things to talk about. Where you want to go?
Wherever you want to go, Coach.
Okay. Track and field. We just got, as everybody else did nationally, got our spring schedule canceled, and we were looking forward to it because it was going to have actually been our 7th year for track and field. Spring Hill. That's actually why when you talk about where you've been, what you've done, who you worked with. I know the East Coast well. I know the Northeast. I was in New York for 25 years. And,
all right. You know what I'm talking about.
So there, hosted meets in the Army. I was at the University of Albany in Albany, New York for 15 years. And the last 10, the head cross country coach as well, and associate head track coach at Albany.
You know about Van Cortlandt Park then?
Absolutely.
That's where
cross country venues in the nation, right there.
Oh, I didn't know that, but that's where I went to William Howard Taft High School, and these kids think they got it. We would get out of school and have to take the train to Van Cortlandt Park. And
Yep.
and wherever you lived in the city, it'd be dark when we finished. You took the train home, and then you walked from the train station to wherever you lived.
Yep. Yep, absolutely. And I think the big thing is no matter where I've been, I think the thing and that's actually the reason Spring Hill's program is actually the reason I left UAlbany is I was fortunate they were starting track and field, and they from scratch, never had track and field before, and it was an opportunity to start a brand new program. Very few people have an opportunity to start a program from scratch, and
Create the culture.
and checked all the boxes, and I ended up, my family and I moved in July of 2012, to Mobile, Alabama, and started the program, and we've never looked back. But that first year we were blessed to have a number of kids. It was too late to recruit, but we were blessed to have had a number of kids on campus that had participated in track and field in high school, and it was like not even tryouts. We did, but we didn't. It was like you needed warm bodies to just even field a team. And, but we lucked out. We got some, and no time to get ready. First spring, 2013. And my gosh, we had guys being warriors with, doing 6 events in a relay or whatever, just to be able to cover events and do what we needed to do. We didn't fake it till we made it. Everybody trained in the events they were going to compete in and trained hard. And bless them all, our guys were third that year in our, for the first time ever for Spring Hill in a conference, and our women were 6th.
And what conference were you in?
It was the Southern States Athletic Conference. It was an NAIA conference.
Oh, right.
And we were NAIA for the first 2 years that I was at Spring Hill, and we made the transition to Division II. And so we just finished. This year was actually our second Division II year.
And what conference are you in Division II?
We're in the SIAC conference, Southern
right.
Conference.
How tough a conference? How tough is the competition in that conference?
It's tough.
On 1 to 10.
What's that?
On a 1 to 10 rating.
Well, if the other coaches in my conference, see this, I better say it's a 10. But no, it's tough. I mean, given some events, it's depending on how you want to field your team and what you want to do and how you want to do it, it's at least an 8.5 as far as the war value and being intense and being the way track and field should be. It's got to be a 10.
All right. Now this also, I'm cutting you off a little bit because I want to cover a couple of other things as you're talking. Coming from the East Coast, especially Albany, training in that type of weather versus training down south. What do you got to say about that? And what kind of plus does that give an athlete from that weather? Because I was always jealous of them guys out in California, and because they were able to train almost year round. And you mentioned the Armory,
yep.
and what have you. It's altogether different being able to train on a 220 track versus a quarter-mile track.
Absolutely. And I think, obviously, the big, glaring thing is the temperatures that you deal with and stuff like that. But I remember being in New York, and no matter whether I was at Hartwick College early on at University of Albany for the last 15 years, I was at. If we could be on the track, we were on the track during the winter as opposed to being inside. And we would, God bless our grounds crew. They would off lanes, 3 through 6, and we would use the middle of the track and, a few extra inches on each side for when that snow melts, even in the wintertime a little bit, so you don't have some ice. But we would be on the track outdoors, and people forget that if you get, the sun radiating off the track, you could have a 35-degree day, but if you've got the sun coming off of that, even with the snow around, you could luck out and have it feel like it was 45, 48 degrees on the track.
All right. See, I wasn't aware of that.
Every time we could.
Because my day was cinder track. Just when I was a senior, they came with the
Yep.
artificial.
Yep. If you had a dirt or a cinder track, it wasn't going to play like that, but it would be, if you got it cleaned off a little bit and things dried out a tiny bit without getting more snow, you could have had an okay dirt, cinder oval, but it would have taken a few days to wait on it. But moving from there to Mobile, doesn't matter whether you're in Florida or Mobile, Alabama, or along the Gulf Coast, the humidity is a big deal. Thank goodness that we don't have the humidity.
Play? Talk to our audience how that plays. I didn't even look at that angle on training, stamina, and what have you.
Well, thank goodness that we don't have the Mobile humidity that we have in July and early August during our competitive year. I mean, you could have some days when it's going to be really humid and you're going to break 88% for humidity and you're going to have a 90-degree temperature or something like that. But during our competitive year, that's more the exception than the rule. I'm kidding, but I'm not, because I take what's going on nationally with coronavirus very seriously. But, social distancing, it's not social distancing in the summer, but in July, parts of July, if you don't have to go outside, you don't go outside because it's that hot. And you make sure your air conditioning works because it gets that hot. And so being inside is not uncommon around here, especially in parts of July. But
what kind of facilities do you have indoor at Spring?
What's that?
What kind of facilities do you have at Spring Hill?
We don't.
Different colleges have different.
Yeah, some places, some of the D1 schools will have access to either their own or a smaller. It may be a 200, but or a 3-lane track. Some of them have their own 6-lane. North of here, at the Crossplex in Birmingham is where D1 and D2 nationals have been. So we've hit that, very infrequently for an indoor meet, just because of how we've choose to structure our season. We have outdoor only right now since track and field is new, and rather than watering ourselves down and competing both seasons, we're actually trying to make sure that we take care of outdoor season and give that a bang up job with what and how we're fielding teams before we move indoors. But as we do, it's going to stretch our season out a little bit. But to do that right now, the idea is with the way it's set up, we're out, during January. I mean, I don't miss, the snow. I gave away, when I moved down here, I gave away a brand new snowblower that I hadn't even owned for 6 months. Never want to own one ever again. But I mean, I have no complaints. I mean, if I can in half of those days, I can wear a polo and shorts and be on the track, with the team training, I'm all for it. And we take advantage.
How many scholarships are you able to have?
What's that?
How many scholarships are you able to have?
We're fully funded.
Oh man, that must be nice. Because I interviewed the coach at different sports. At Lincoln University, I was interviewing the football coach yesterday, and he's competing against schools that have multi-million-dollar budgets. They have 30 scholarships for football. He only has 16. He says it really shows up in the second half of the games that the type of kids you're able to. So, I see you don't want to go nowhere. You in heaven.
We're set. We're very, very fortunate. A huge box that got checked off 3 or 4 times over in coming here, because they were having and making the transition. I knew we were going to be NAIA for 2 years when I got down here, but to make a real commitment to be in a flag 2 program. And
how were the buildings and the facilities?
We actually use a high school facilities. St. Paul's High School is right next door to our campus.
Right.
If we want to build one, the closest place we could is 1.5 miles, and for kids to be able to get out of class, go to their dorm room, change, go down the hill,
and jog down. That's
we've got it, and it's like literally 200 meters from our campus, and it's a great high school facility. All the event venues, it's 8,500, and it's a nice, let me put it this way, it's a nice enough facility that A.J. McCarron from Alabama played his high school football there. So it's a great facility. And so we're blessed to have that next door. And I think having that there, Spring Hill actually owns the property that St. Paul's has the track on. So it's a nice working relationship there.
Is that where you have your dual meets at?
Yeah, I mean, right now, if we opted just because of having we don't really have a dual schedule. And right now in growing our program and taking care of performing on the conference level, we've opted to not host, like an outdoor meet. We've hosted cross country. We've hosted one outdoor meet to say we did in 2014. But, the competitive opportunities with weather and 2-day meets, our schedule, people think of, the high school schedule in the South is actually longer than the college schedule is, really. And so we're trying to maximize the time with our own athletes. And, when we have hosted a meet, we've got a full set of officials, but me being me as a meet director, I wanted to have my hand in how we're running the meet. So you're splitting duty. And, a year ago and this year, we obviously didn't have our outdoor championship. It would have been our second one. Our focus has been having our teams and our student athletes ready to perform. So we're being selfish. We just don't want to give up that weekend to coach our own kids to be able to. But we would host one there, or we have hosted one at Gulf Shores at the Sportsplex down in Gulf Shores, Alabama.
Hey, Coach, this is another question, and I've been so far removed from track and field. I wanted to ask you, what do you build your team around? As I told you, we had 8 quarter milers that ran under 50, but they they ran from the mile down to the quarter, like the 149. He focused around quarter milers to build out the team. He had distance people, and we had Carl Gatson went out to the Golden West and won the triple jump back in the 60s. But how do you comprise your team? What do you focus on, the type that you recruit?
Well, first off, regardless of event, it's got to be like a great young person. We're looking at, everybody talks about the word character, personality, the whole 9 yards. But, we look at, who the person is, how they are in a social setting, but, we want everybody, coming in, somebody could be ranked number 1 in the nation. And if we are fortunate enough to be able to recruit them, if they couldn't be team first, we'd take a pass, because I think that's why, we've, gone someplace in a short period of time that we have, is we've really looked at somebody that can be team first. And not a lot of kids are willing to do that. Some kids would rather be the big fish in the small pond, or the big fish, on the beach with no pond, and be the star. And so we're looking for anybody that's selfless.
Really talk about that. Expand on that a little bit more, because I don't care what sport it is. I think that the type of character that you need, the work ethic, the ability. I go back to John F. Kennedy, and this goes across the board. And I don't know who wrote his line, or whether that was a real line. It's not what your nation can do for you, it's what you can do for your nation. And I break that down to team, to family, to everything. And we live in this me generation, and I won't say generation, over the last, to me, 3 decades, that has been incorporated into our psyche and integrity and all of that type stuff. I find it sours me. It's more on I call it plasticity, being politically correct versus it coming from your heart. And the age that I feel we came from, it was the real deal. That how do you talk to a young freshman right now, or a senior in high school, what you think it takes to come to Spring Hill?
got to be team first. You got to take care of grades. Spring Hill's a great academic school, so kids have to have you don't have to have a 36 on the ACT, but you've got to have a solid test score. And then grades are important because they're going to be important when you get into our program. And one thing we kid everybody about, moms and dads love it, but that's not why we say it, is somebody could have a 36 on the ACT and an adjusted test score or GPA of 5.0, and they're going to be in study hall first semester because we want to make sure that they get off to a great start. So academics are actually, really, really huge. Again, our program's very young. This past fall for cross country, that was only our second NCAA cross country season. So our women's team was fortunate enough, just based where we are in evolution to be Division II, our women's team had our first NCAA all academic team in the fall for women's cross country. The guys just missed. But we had a young lady that was individually academic All-American in cross country, plus the women's team going as a team. We're as proud of that as the back-to-back women's, cross country championships that we won in 2018 and 2019 in our first and second conference meets. So academics are absolutely huge. And but given that, if the person can be all about team, everything will take care of itself. And I think a big thing that we subscribe to is the fact that, and I think somebody that's, this is one of our staff shirts. That's what I wear half the time when I'm at practice or to meet, because number one, we want our kids to know where we are. If you got to find us.
Well, that's me too, Coach. Look at me.
There you go. Got to know where we are. Yeah. Got to know where we are. But we also have a team shirt that's the same color. It helps if they're out on a run after class when the hours of daylight get late and it gets darker. They can be safe finishing some type of a run or a workout, and they're visible. So we've gone to neon for some of our team shirts. But on the back of the team shirt, we have this logo on the front. It says Spring Hill Track and Field, and it's got our Badger head on it. But on the back it says "Live It." So and we mean that, and that is our team mantra. And you can talk to people about recruiting, and you can talk to people about what you're about, who you are at the end of the day. But if you don't live it every day, if you can't be that for your teammates every day, a little bit of a junior 1% version of what you see nationally right now, what people are doing for, essential workers, hospitals, doctors, nurses, first responders, just the little things to put other people first. Well, our 1% of that is if they can't live that way every day for their teammates and take care of their training. When you guys show up to get on the bus, if we can't do that every day, we're imposters. Your teammates think that you're somebody they can count on. When you were supposed to do that recovery run, did you do all of it? When you were supposed to go to the training room, did you do all of it? When you were supposed to lift, and even though you're being supervised, did you lift the way that you were supposed to lift? And so, it becomes very self-propelling in that regard, that everybody knows, no promises, but, our big deal for everybody that, wants to come into our program, not if, but as they do those things, the promise is, you'll get where you're the talent that the man upstairs gave you. You'll get there because it's got to come from you first. And if we spoon feed you and we cajole you along, we'll provide guidance, we'll provide the training, we'll provide the recovery. But if they can't live it every day for themselves and their teammates, it's not going to work. And so that's purple and white on the backside of our team shirts.
I want to wrap this up. But what just popped in my mind, because you the men's and women's coach, and how boy, this interview is going to be a minute. How different is it coaching women as it is coaching men? Or is there a difference?
I think people make a mistake. I think I've been fortunate because everywhere I've coached, you listen differently, but you coach the same. And the guys need certain things, the ladies need certain things. Guys need different sets of reassurances from other guys. The women's team, each one of them needs reassurance in a different way. Don't worry about this, just see it through one day at a time. But if you pay attention to each additional person, I think a lot of places, that make a huge mistake to say, oh, this is training for the women's team and this is training for the men's team. And mentality, if they treat everybody differently, I look at the individual athlete, and yes, we look at physically what you can do and physically what you can't do. Eliminate your weaknesses, highlight your strengths. But if you do that straight across the board, you're going to have literally, both programs be equally successful. And I think, right now it's worked extremely well with our women's team because they're they're moderately old where they are in their year in school, but they're performing like seniors and grad students. Our guys are physically young, and they're looking at our women as not necessarily role models, but role models on how to train, how to get it done, because our women's team just grabbed it, let's go, like whatever. And the guys still, when you inherit a guy at age 18, they're not where some of the lungs are in their.
They're looking at the girls take care of business, and it's like, we can't let them outdo us. What's their secret? And they can see their secret on the track, training every day. They can see the camaraderie. They can see all. Hey, Coach, you don't know how I do these interviews, but this interview really was a pleasure because it's something that I know about per se. When I'm doing basketball and football, I know about that, but you really brought me home, and I can tell that you're an excellent coach, and your athletes really, really have a gem. Like, you look for a gem or a diamond in the I think that from what you've said, and I feel it in right here, that you know what you're doing, you've been there, you've done that, you've got the experience, and above all, you have, to me, the right ethics, morals, and I don't know you, but just from what you're the type of coach that I would want my son or my daughter to, because it's track and field, it's athletics, but it's also character and building your skill set for life. And we have, if you've gone to our website, it says Cascade Sports, home of the student athlete. And we have another segment where I bring businessmen and different things on to talk about bridging the gap between sports and education, and how you can use your sport to springboard you to get an education that will take care of you for the rest of your life most of the time. And it was on parting, what would your parting words be to athletes and to your fans and your alumni?
To people, young people looking at a place to go to school, whether it's Spring Hill or someplace else, look at a program that lives what they say they do. That takes, I think, I'm big on development. Hopefully you can tell that, but if somebody has the wherewithal to want to be in our program, then we'll accept them with open arms. And the only promise that we make is if you do the work, you'll leave and you'll never, ever regret the decision that you made to spend 4 years with us. To parents, the same thing. We'll look out for a person, and we've had a number of families that have sent us more than one son or daughter into our program, and we're grateful for that. And hopefully that says that we're doing the right things. To our fans, stay tuned. We hope to be back out there competing. We don't know when that's going to be, but I promise that everybody is at home. Maintenance training set for the spring. We'll deal with summer when it gets here, but everybody's like we talk about living it every day. The thing that I'm probably most proud of is everybody at home is doing what they're supposed to do, or the resources they have to train with, to not lose their edge. And I think that's huge. And that's probably one of the most, the biggest things that I'm proud of both squads, both our men and women, track and cross country, is they're out there lighting it up every day because they don't want to lose it. And then to our alums, I think the big deal is we had one whole class in our NCAA process that never, ever got to go to a conference meet. We finished NAIA before they came in. We were, one semester away from our first Division II season. So they went an entire 4 years, an entire college career without ever being able to go to a conference championship. And those people literally left their legacy behind on how to do it and how to get there. They just never had the opportunity. And the thing that I promised them is the people that we have in the program right now understand their legacy, they appreciate the legacy, and they're honoring it every day with the way they live what we do.
Hey, Coach, it was a pleasure having you on the show. And as we always say in all of our shows, when you invest in your community, you're really just investing in yourself. Good night.
The program is brought to you by the Kansas City Business Association.